My fiancé said, "Don't call me your future husband." I nodded. That night, I quietly removed my name from every guest list he'd made. 2 days later, he walked into lunch and froze at what waited on his chair. "Don't call me your future husband." The moment Adrian said it, I didn't flinch. That's the part people never believe. That I sat there, at that candlelit table in Aurelio's with his mother's pearls catching the light across from me and his sister's smirk carving itself into my peripheral vision. And I didn't move a single muscle. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I didn't even set down my wine glass too hard. I simply looked at him. "Don't call me your future husband." 5 words, spoken low, the way men like Adrian Vale speak when they want to wound without witnesses. Polished, deliberate, designed to remind me of my place at a table I'd paid for, in a restaurant where my family had a standing reservation older than his career. The waiter, a young man named Theo, with kind eyes and the unfortunate timing of a saint, had just topped off my glass when I said it. "My future husband hates olives," I'd told him, smiling, gesturing toward Adrian's plate. A throwaway comment, the kind engaged women make 1,000 times before their wedding day. Warm, possessive in the soft, loving way that people who are actually in love are possessive. Adrian's hand went still on his wine glass. Then came the correction. Across the table, Vivian Vale, his mother, 61 years old and dressed like she'd invented old money rather than married into it, studied my engagement ring with the particular expression of a woman who suspects the diamond might be cubic zirconia. Beside her, Camille, Adrian's younger sister, pressed her lips together to contain something that wasn't quite a laugh. Adrian patted my wrist. He actually patted my wrist, the way you'd calm a dog that had barked at the wrong moment. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "You know I care about you." Care. That word landed in my chest like a stone into still water. I felt the ripples move outward slowly, touching everything. I thought about what care looked like in Adrian Vale's vocabulary. It looked like 12 missed dinners explained away by the London deal. It looked like him answering his phone during my father's hospital stay and stepping out without a word. It looked like 3 months of wedding planning in which every decision I made was either overruled or ignored, and every vendor I booked was booked on my credit card, with my signature, under my family name, because his were, as he put it, temporarily overextended. Temporarily overextended. I looked at him. I nodded once. "Of course," I said. "I understand." He smiled, the smile of a man who has just re-established the correct order of things. He picked up his fork. He ate an olive. That night, I sat at my desk in the penthouse. My penthouse. The one my grandmother left me. The one Adrian had been sleeping in for 14 months, while he snored in the bedroom down the hall. I opened my laptop. I opened every wedding spreadsheet he had ever sent me, forwarded me, CC'd me on, or stored in our shared drive. Guest lists, vendor contacts, security clearances for the venue, hotel room blocks at the Harlow Grand, the florist invoice, the tasting menu confirmation from Bellamy House. One by one, I removed my name from all of it. Then I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Noelle Achterberg, my executive assistant and the most quietly lethal person I have ever employed. The second was to Dominic Farr, a forensic accountant I'd used twice before in corporate disputes, who had the precise manner of a man who finds joy only in other people's financial ruin. The third was to my cousin Petra, who is a family law attorney and who answered the phone at 11:40 at night with nothing more than, "I've been waiting for this call." I hadn't told any of them anything yet. They just knew me well enough to know. I should explain how I got here, because none of it happened the way people assume when they see a woman like me attached to a man like Adrian. My name is Mara Voss Hendrick. I am 34 years old. My grandmother, Elsa Voss, built Voss Property Group from a single building in the financial district in 1971 and turned it into a portfolio worth somewhere north of $400 million by the time she died. My father, Willem Hendrick, merged his own architectural firm with the group in 1998 and spent the next 2 decades making sure the company was as structurally sound as anything he ever designed. I joined the board at 27. I became managing director at 31. I am not, as Adrian once implied at a dinner party, someone who married well. I am someone from whom people hope to benefit by marrying. I met Adrian Vale at a fundraiser 18 months ago. He was charming in the specific way that men are charming when they have identified a target, attentive without being overwhelming, curious about my work without asking anything that might reveal he'd researched me beforehand, which he absolutely had. He ran a mid-size media and communications consultancy called Vale Meridian, profitable on paper, credible enough for name cards at important tables. He had a good jaw and a better tailor, and he laughed at exactly the right moments. I knew he was interested in what I represented as much as who I was. I told myself that was fine. I told myself I was too old and too clear-eyed to expect otherwise in these circles. What I did not tell myself was that he was actively drowning. I didn't know that yet. The first sign I missed, or more accurately, the first sign I chose to interpret generously, was 6 weeks in, when he asked very casually whether my family still had the relationship with the Bellamy House membership committee. He wanted to host a client dinner there, he said. Difficult to get a table without the right introduction. I made a call. The dinner happened. He thanked me with flowers, and I told myself that's how it works in this world. People use their connections for each other. That's not a red flag. That's just Tuesday. The second sign was the wedding deposit. He suggested we use my card for the points. $62,000 in vendor deposits, all on my Centurion card, all in my name, all within the first month of our engagement. I didn't think about it hard enough. I was planning a wedding. I was busy. The third third sign was his enthusiasm for the timeline. Every time I suggested we slow down, take another month to finalize things, he would become quietly, firmly insistent. We've already booked the venue. The florist has a waiting list. Mara, I need us to be united on this. That word again. United. I know now what united meant. It meant, hurry up and make yourself legally mine before someone looks too closely at my books. Noelle arrived at my office at 7:15 the morning after the restaurant. She is 38, Norwegian by birth, and she has worked for me for 6 years. She once reorganized my entire financial filing system over a single weekend because she found a misfiled receipt and it offended her. She set a leather portfolio on my desk, sat down across from me, and said, "How much do you already know?" "Not enough," I said. "Tell me the rest." She opened the portfolio. Vale Meridian had 3 major contracts listed in their last investor report. Noelle had requested copies of all 3 through a shell inquiry Dominic Farr set up specifically for this. The first contract, with a regional telecoms group, had been inflated by approximately 38% in the reported figures. The second had been terminated 4 months ago. The termination had not been disclosed to Vale Meridian's investors, of which there were 6, one of whom was a silent partner I recognized immediately, my father's firm. Voss Hendrick Architecture had extended a consulting credit to Vale Meridian 11 months ago as part of a goodwill arrangement Adrian had negotiated directly with my father before my father's hospitalization, when I had been, conveniently, managing 2 simultaneous property closings and not paying close enough attention to what my fiancé was doing with my family. The third contract had never been signed. It existed only in Vale Meridian's investor materials. It was, in the technical language Dominic Farr would later use in his report, fraudulent. I sat with that word for a moment. Fraudulent. And the loan? I asked. We had discovered through Dominic's inquiry that Adrian had taken a private bridging loan 6 months ago against projected revenue. Revenue that, as we now understood, did not exist in the form he had represented. Noelle's expression didn't change. Default notice was delivered this morning. Dominic filed the trigger documentation last night. I laughed once. It came out short and dry, with no warmth in it whatsoever. So that's why he rushed the wedding. He needed my name. Mara Voss Hendrick on a marriage certificate would have given him access to certain shared asset arrangements we'd discussed in passing. Arrangements I had, at the time, considered romantic rather than strategic. It would have given him standing, legitimacy, a financial lifeline dressed up as a love story. There's one more thing, Noelle said. She slid a photograph across the desk. I looked at it for a long moment. Hotel service elevator, Adrian, and Camille's best friend, a woman named Tessa Rourke, who had been a bridesmaid in our tentative wedding party and who I had personally taken to lunch 3 times to welcome into my life. I put the photograph face down on my desk. The lunch is Friday, I said. Yes. Bellamy House? Yes. I looked out the window at the city. 31 floors below, people moved through the streets at the ordinary pace of people who were not currently dismantling their entire engagement like a building scheduled for demolition. Make sure everything is in place by Thursday evening, I said. Noelle picked up her portfolio. Already started. I should tell you about Dominic Farr because he matters to what happened next. Dominic is 53 years old, formerly with the Serious Fraud Office, now in private practice. He has the affect of a man who has never once been surprised by what human beings are willing to do for money, and the meticulous precision of someone who has testified in 41 financial fraud cases and lost exactly twice. He billed at £420 an hour and was worth considerably more. He delivered his preliminary findings to me on Thursday morning in a 12-page document labeled, in his characteristically understated way, Vale Meridian, Preliminary Findings, RE, Financial Irregularities. The summary was 3 paragraphs. The substance was damning in the specific, granular way that only documentary evidence can be damning. Not accusation, not inference, but numbers that didn't match, dates that contradicted each other, signatures on documents that bore the wrong timestamps. One contract, the one that had never been signed, had been included in an investor presentation Adrian gave in January. The presentation included a slide with the contract's projected value rendered in a clean, confident bar chart. The chart was a fabrication. Dominic also flagged, with academic neutrality, that the bridging loan Adrian had taken was secured partly against his anticipated post-marriage access to certain Voss Hendrick assets. The loan agreement referenced my family name explicitly. He had borrowed against me before we were even married. I signed Dominic's authorization for the full forensic report. I also called my cousin, Petra Voss Lindqvist, family law attorney, 8 years at Reinhardt and Muller before going independent, who confirmed in the brisk, surgical way she confirms everything that the engagement could be dissolved without legal complication, that the deposits were recoverable given the documentation, and that if I wanted to pursue any of the financial irregularities through civil channels, the case was remarkably clean. He's not very good at this, Petra said, with something approaching admiration for my own situation, which I appreciated. No, I said. He's just very good at finding women who won't look. By Thursday evening, Noelle had confirmed everything. The hotel deposits, both of them, the Harlow Grand Room block and the secondary accommodation for out-of-town guests, were on my card, my name. Recoverable the moment I withdrew consent, which I had done in a single email to both venues at 10 o'clock that morning. The floral contract, my signature, canceled. The Bellamy House venue agreement, I was listed as primary client. Adrian's name appeared only as secondary, with authorization authorization rights that extended only as far as I permitted. The moment Noel called the managing director, a man named Cyril Atchison, who has known my family for 22 years and who, upon hearing what I needed, said simply, "Consider it done," those authorization rights evaporated. The announcement, drafted by Petra, formal and precise, noting the dissolution of the engagement between Mara Voss-Hendrick and Adrian Vale, effective immediately. Dominic's summary letter, attached. The photograph printed on matte paper, which somehow made it worse. All of it placed inside a cream envelope, sealed with black wax, my grandmother's wax seal, the one I'd had restruck from her original signet when she died, and set on the chair at the head of the table at Bellamy House, where Adrian had fully expected to sit. Friday morning, I dressed in ivory, not bridal ivory, the ivory of a woman who has made a decision and arrived at peace with it. A structured dress, high collar, no jewelry except my grandmother's watch. I looked, I thought, like a closing argument. I arrived at Bellamy House through the side entrance at 11:45. My grandmother's portrait hangs in the main dining room above the fireplace, commissioned in 1983, painted by an artist whose name I can never quite remember, and whose work now sells for amounts that would have made him faint. The managing director, Cyril, met me at the door. We didn't hug. We are not people who hug in professional contexts, but he inclined his head in a way that communicated everything. The garden room had been rearranged. Adrian's seating plan, which Noel had obtained through the venue's records, had been quietly set aside. New menus. New place cards? No, actually no place cards at all. Because why would there be when the guest list had been reduced to the people I had actually invited? My father's business partner, Louisa Brandt, my attorney Petra, Noel, and 2 board members from Voss-Hendrick, who had been quietly copied on Dominic's preliminary findings because they had a right to know about the exposure to their firm. Adrian's guests, Vivian, Camille, the groomsmen, the editor friend, the investors, had received no cancellation notice. I had deliberately left that alone. Let them come. Let them arrive and find what they found. On Adrian's chair, the envelope. I sat at the head of the table beneath my grandmother's portrait, and I ordered sparkling water, and I waited. Vivian arrived first, at 12:10, in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and entitlement. She swept through the entrance of the garden room and stopped when she saw the seating arrangement, or the absence of the one she'd expected. Her gaze moved around the room with the sharp efficiency of a woman cataloging threats. "Where's Mara?" she demanded, of no one in particular. "At the head table," the maitre d' answered. His name was Francois, 60 years old, 32 years at Bellamy House, and he had served my grandmother lunch on the last day of her life. He was not intimidated by Vivian Vale. "My son sits at the head," Vivian said. "Not today, Mrs. Vale." Camille had followed her mother in. She laughed at that, a short, sharp sound, and looked around the room with the expression she always wore, the one that said she found everything slightly beneath her. Then she saw me, sitting very still under Elsa Voss's portrait, and something in her expression shifted. "Do you even know who we are?" Camille said, to Francois, in the tone people use when they want someone to feel small. Francois smiled. It was a very small smile, and very precise. "Yes," he said. That one word landed differently than Camille expected. I could see it in the way she went slightly still, the way the certainty in her expression developed a hairline crack. Good. The groomsmen arrived, the editor. 2 of Adrian's investors, men in their 50s, who I recognized from Dominic's report, and who recognized me, I could tell, with a flicker of something uncomfortable passing across their faces. They were seated, not at the head table, but at a side arrangement that Francois managed with impeccable professionalism, and served water and bread and the quiet, specific discomfort of a room in which something is clearly wrong, but no one has yet said it aloud. Petra sat to my right, calm as marble. Louisa Brandt, who had known me since I was 12 years old and who had reviewed Dominic's findings the night before with the expression of a woman discovering a gas leak, sat to my left. At 12:27, Adrian arrived. I know it was 12:27 because I looked at my grandmother's watch. He came in talking on his phone, which was so precisely, almost satirically Adrian that I could have scripted it. One hand in his jacket pocket, the posture of a man who owns the room before he enters it. "No, the wedding is absolutely fine. She gets emotional sometimes, but she always..." He saw me. He stopped in the entrance of the garden room with his phone still at his ear and his sentence unfinished, hanging in the air between us like smoke. I looked at him from beneath my grandmother's portrait. I did not smile. I did not raise my glass. I simply looked, the way you look at something you are seeing clearly for the first time, without generosity, without the soft focus of hope or affection, just clearly. He ended the call. "Mara," he said, too bright. The voice he used at galas when he wanted to seem pleased to see someone he actually needed something from. "There you are." I nodded toward his chair. He crossed the room. The other guests were watching. His groomsmen, his mother, his sister, the investors. No one spoke. The only sound was the particular silence of a room full of people who understand that something is happening that they do not fully understand yet. He reached his chair. He looked down. The cream envelope, black wax seal, his name written across the front in my handwriting, which is very neat and very deliberate because I learned to write from my grandmother, who believed that penmanship was a form of self-respect. His face went carefully blank. I have seen that face before. The face Adrian wears when he is deciding which version of himself to deploy. The warm, disarming version. The aggrieved, reasonable version. The version that says, "You're overreacting, darling. Let's not make a scene." He picked up the envelope. His hands weren't entirely steady. Good, I thought. thought, open it. He broke the wax seal. He unfolded the paper. He read. I watched his face as he read. I watched the blank expression hold, and then begin to dissolve at the edges, the way ice does. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the slow, irreversible way of something that cannot be stopped once it has started. He reached the second page, Dominic's summary, the one that laid out the loan default, the fraudulent contract, the inflated figures, the fact that his firm's reported assets were a fiction he had maintained long enough to get a ring on my finger, and I saw the precise moment he understood. It was not a loud moment. There was no shouting, no confrontation, no scene in the Bellamy House garden room with oil portraits watching. Adrian Vale was too controlled for that, too practiced, but his jaw tightened. His knuckles went white around the papers, and his eyes, when they came up to find mine across the table, had lost the performance in them entirely. For the first time since I had met him, I was looking at the real Adrian Vale, without the charm, without the architecture of confidence he'd spent years constructing, just a man holding documents that proved what he was, in a room full of people who were beginning to understand why they'd been invited. Mara, he said, quietly, almost private. The engagement announcement goes public at 2 o'clock, I said, equally quietly. Dominic Farr's full report will be shared with your investors. I glanced briefly at the two men sitting at the side table, who were now extremely attentive. Later this afternoon. My cousin Petra is here if you have legal questions. Petra, to my right, didn't look up from her water glass. She did, however, turn it slowly between her fingers, which I recognized as her version of satisfaction. The hotel deposits have been returned to my account, I continued. The venue is released. The vendors have been notified. Your guests are welcome to enjoy lunch, courtesy of Bellamy House, as my guests. I paused. There will be no wedding. Vivian made a sound across the room, a sharp social sound, the kind that precedes a performance of outrage. I looked at her. Mrs. Vale, I said, your son took a bridging loan secured against my family's assets without my knowledge. He presented fabricated contracts to investors, one of whom is my father's firm. He has been conducting an affair with a woman I welcomed into my home. I said each sentence at the same pace, the same volume. No heat, just information. I'm sure you understand. Vivian did not, in fact, make the sound again. Camille was looking at the photograph. I had placed a copy on her plate as well because I believe in thoroughness, with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was the expression of someone whose enjoyment of other people's humiliations has met for the first time its own reflection. Adrian set the papers down on the table. He straightened his jacket. He looked at me for a long moment with an expression I could not entirely read. Not quite anger, not quite shame. Something in between that I suspected was the specific grief of a man who has lost a game he didn't realize he was playing until the board was flipped. You planned this, he said. Yes, I said. All of it. Yes. He nodded once, very slowly. A gesture so small it was almost nothing. I underestimated you, he said. I picked up my water glass. Yes, I said. You did. He left. He walked back through the garden room with his jacket straight and his chin level, because he was, above everything else, a man who cared about appearances. But the investors were already leaning toward each other. His groomsmen were exchanging looks that held very little loyalty. Vivian was speaking to no one, staring at the portrait above the fireplace with an expression of dawning calculation. Already, I could tell, reassessing what this association had cost her. Camille picked up the photograph. She turned it over. She set it down. She said nothing. Dominic Farr's full forensic report was submitted to Vale Meridian's investors at 3:45 that afternoon. By 5 o'clock, 2 of them had engaged their own counsel. By Monday, the 3rd had filed a civil complaint. Vale Meridian entered voluntary administration 6 weeks later. The bridging lender, presented with Dominic's documentation of fraud, accelerated the default and pursued Adrian personally for the full amount. A figure I was told later by Petra was in the region of £800,000. The lender's solicitors were not gentle. The affair with Tessa Rourke became known within their social circle, not because I said anything about it, but because Camille, in a remarkable act of self-preservation, told the story herself before anyone else could. She framed it as outrage. She framed herself as also deceived. I found this impressive in its own cold way. I returned my engagement ring to Adrian by courier, with a note from Petra formally documenting the return and its receipt. I did not include a personal message. My father, once he had fully reviewed Dominic's report, referred the matter of the fraudulent contract, the one that had referenced Voss Hendrick Architecture, to the firm's legal team. I was told criminal fraud proceedings were being explored. I did not ask for updates. It's been 7 months now. I still live in the penthouse. The guest room, where Adrian slept for 14 months, has been repainted. A deep ivory that Noelle found in a restoration catalog, the same color my grandmother used in the original interiors. It suits the space better. It suits me better. I still pass Theo at Aurelio's occasionally, the waiter with kind eyes who was there that first night. He never says anything about it, but once, about 2 months ago, he brought my table a glass of sparkling wine I hadn't ordered and said only, "From the house, Ms. Voss Hendrick," and walked away. I thought that was rather elegant. Adrian, as of the last I heard, is consulting independently. The Vale Meridian name is gone. His Bellamy House membership, which he never actually had, he'd been admitted as my guest, is no longer relevant. He gave an interview to a business podcast in which he described his company's challenges as the result of a difficult macroeconomic environment. The host didn't push back. I don't wish him harm. I want to be clear about that. I'm not built for sustained hatred. It requires an investment of attention I'd rather put elsewhere. What I wished for and received craved was accuracy. I wanted the record corrected. I wanted the people he had deceived, including my father's firm, including 6 investors who deserved to know, to have the information they needed to protect themselves. And I wanted to sit beneath my grandmother's portrait, in the room she had helped build, in a dress the color of a conclusion, and watch the truth arrive at his chair before he did. That part, I'll admit, I did want. I have my grandmother's signet ring now, the one I used to seal the envelope. It fits my right hand exactly. I had it cleaned after, the wax residue removed, the metal polished back to its original precision. Elsa Voss built everything she had by understanding one thing very clearly, that the moment you allow someone to redefine your value, you have already begun to lose. I sat at her table. I used her seal. I did not lose.